unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from beautiful BC and Calgary, Alberta, this is Left of the Valley 2.0. My name is Kevin, and I was told that apparently I'm the worst she's ever had in bed, but I said, you can't judge that in 30 seconds.
That's what she said?
That's what she said. Joining me is the beautiful Christine. Hi, Christine. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Fantastic. And we have a returning guest from last week, Aubrey and Kathleen. Ladies, it's a pleasure to have you back.
We're glad to be here.
Fantastic. We're going to have a great show this week because we have a very special guest. We have the legendary voice of the one and unique Thinking Atheist show. Seth Andrews is with us. Seth, it's always a pleasure, of course.
Notice how he didn't introduce me as beautiful. He didn't say the beautiful Seth Andrews. Notice that omission.
With, dare I say, the very sexy voice.
Well, thanks for letting me play along. It's good to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Nice to see you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So today we're going to be talking about Seth's latest book, Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. And what a fantastic title to begin with. So, Seth, I know for most atheists, you don't really need any introduction, but we always have new listeners. So maybe be so kind to give us a quick introduction as to who Seth Andrews is.
Well, just in a nutshell, I was a product of an evangelical home, theologian parents, Christian school, spokesperson for Youth for Christ, kind of a communicator for the faith, and ended up being a Christian broadcaster for a lot of years, about a dozen years. And then I segued into video production for a company that mostly served churches. And so I was deeply immersed in the faith. Dad was ex-Lutheran, mom was Pentecostal, went to a Baptist school. So Protestantism kind of across the board. I was able to sample at the buffet of the Christian faith. And in my 30s, I finally realized I hadn't really done much of my own thinking on this stuff, and I had embraced that sort of distrust of reason that the Bible commands, right? Trust not in your own understanding. And I more and more became dissatisfied with the idea that faith is the way to determine what is real and what is true. And so I just started a journey, and back to Genesis 1:1, read the Bible, started finally delving into what the evolutionary sciences were and the history of religions and health theology, etc. And at the end of that journey, and it was well over a year, I realized that it just didn't wash. It was totally unsatisfying. And I was an atheist. I said the word atheist in regard to myself in 2008. The next year, in an attempt to be a part of the conversation and find community, I started a website called The Thinking Atheist, which is not a person, it is an idea. The idea is we reject faith and embrace reason. Started the podcast in 2010, and here we are 12 years later, still kicking. So that's me in a nutshell.
That's a great nutshell.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's amazing because of your past working in the past. Essentially, you were essentially the typical conservative Fox News viewer, Christian apologist.
Mm-hmm. Well, I wrote a book on that called Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. But I was, one thing about hardline evangelical fundamental Christianity is it tends to go very often very much in line with sort of this right-wing American nationalistic thing. God is a conservative. This is kind of how we looked at it. And so I was that guy, I was raised around it. We read Newsmax magazine, and I read Ann Coulter books and listened to Rush Limbaugh, loved Sean Hannity, and it's funny because once I started to emerge from the faith, I was still leaning in that direction, but I went case by case back through a lot of my value system. And I thought, well, how much of these issues were colored by my religion? So, one by one, I went through the death penalty. How do I feel about that? Right to die issues, death with dignity, medical aid and dying issues. I realized that religion had colored my opinion on that. And so that changed dramatically. Reproductive choice, immigration, the role of healthcare in a civilized society. Those types of things. Were we a Christian nation? Well, I began to finally read about the founding fathers and find out kind of what that was about. And I found point by point, I had been looking through a religious lens and a very myopic lens. And I realized that I didn't hold to a great many of those things anymore. And so I guess I shifted sort of away from that into a much more liberal and what I would consider to be humanistic point of view. And so with the book Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian, I sort of reverse engineer how do we get here? What are the origins of the network? What about this culture of people who are essentially an information silo, taught to distrust all other information sources and get all of their news from Tucker Carlson, you know? And so that's kind of what that's about. But I escaped in a great many ways, and I'm glad to be here. So.
One of your many books that you've been writing, and I thoroughly enjoy your books. The last one I read was Sacred Cows, which also was funny.
I guess I write. I don't know if I'm too prolific, if I'm bored, if I just can't stop typing. You know, I've got a lot of material out there for better or for worse. You know. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But today we're talking about your latest book, Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. Now, my first question is, how did you get through your editor with that title? Because that's a
Well, you know, even on the back of the book jacket, and it's based on a speech I gave 5 years ago, which I thought was kind of a throwaway. I was just venting. And it became easily the most popular presentation I've ever given. I mean, if I get 100,000 views on a speech on YouTube, I'm delighted because it's a freaking speech asking somebody to give 45 minutes of their time. And Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot, I think it's at 1.5 million and counting. And the book, and it says on the cover, and it says in the introduction and throughout, I was not an idiot when I was a believer. I don't think Christians are idiots any more than the average person is an idiot. Like I've met religious idiots, I've met atheist idiots, I've met people across the, I mean, human beings are human beings for better and for worse. But I found myself, because of my faith, saying things that, when you look at it objectively, make no sense. They just don't wash, and they just sound ridiculous. And I thought the title was, you know, an attention getter, in the hopes that, you know, I'm not going to change the mind of a fundamentalist with this book. I'm not stupid, you know. But I am looking for somebody who might be where I was. They're tapping on the glass. They're not satisfied. Something's not adding up. They realize some of this stuff, you know, when they do that, like I address in the book, the idea of communion. How could it have been normalized that we say, I am going to ritualize the eating of flesh and the drinking of blood? You know, how do we sing songs like are you washed in the blood? Singing about being washed in blood as if it's a normal thing. I mean, we don't even blink. And yet, if you tried this with another God in another context, right? I want to be washed in the blood of Allah or Krishna, or make up a God. You know, I call him Braun, bringer of light. Wash me in your blood. It sounds creepy and culty in that context. And so that's what the book does. I think it sort of steps back a few paces and it says, you know, does this all really wash, or have we simply gotten so used to it because we were born into it and it's rampant, that we've normalized what is essentially, in many cases, abnormal? And I think the criticisms are fair. So that's what the book does.
I think you're bringing in a very important point there. The idea that, for atheists, yes, not to dismiss Christians as people of lesser intelligence. When many of us deconverted from the faith, we didn't gain any IQ points, and I think that's a very good point you're making there.
Well, I also lament there's some kind of a nauseatingly superiority thing that, you know, kind of drifts off the mouths of some people. I mean, I guess I was guilty when I had just emerged and I was mad and I felt like I'd been cheated and those types of things, you know. But I see a lot of memes and stuff shared about religious people that they're all this, and it's usually a pejorative, you know. And I'm like, well, that's just not fair. I mean, you know, I agree with Dale McGowan. Values are more important than beliefs. My next door neighbor is a worship pastor. He's one of my favorite people in the world. He's just a beautiful guy who would give you the shirt off his back. He is precious in every way. We disagree on the God question. Yes, I think the church is doing some damage out there, but I don't look at him and think he is stupid or awful or evil. I look at him and say, he's a dude I'd like to hang out with more than many atheists I've met, you know, more than people of other faiths. Again, it comes down to, what kind of human being are you? We can talk about your values and belief system afterward, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So was it just simply the speech that you given in the views? You basically said, "Well, I'm kind of bumped into something big here, so I think I'm just going to expand on that and write a book."
I think it was the surprising popularity of it made me think there was probably an appetite for more of this. And it was a chance to take a deeper dive. You have 45 minutes on stage and you're blowing through everything from blessing the meal or asking God to guide the hands of the surgeon or the little Christianese platitudes that believers like to use, bless your heart, where the Lord closes a door, he opens a window, and everything happens for a reason, and I'm flying through these examples of things that when you look at them don't make a lot of sense. But in the book, I'm able to get into things like intelligent design, supposedly intelligent design. And so much of how we are, put together only makes sense evolutionarily. It doesn't make sense as far as a design because it's bad design.
Mhm.
And, the true wonders of being an evolved primate and our relationship to all other life forms. I mean, that's a whole chapter. I get into the apologists and how I think it's ridiculous that God would need apologists who can't even agree with each other on anything to explain God. If God cared enough, he'd show up and he'd make himself plain in a way that nobody on the planet could ever dispute or disagree with. And instead, you got the Frank Turek's and the William Lane Craigs and the Lee Strobels, and they all sit around. Kent Hovind and Ken Ham, they're all squabbling. They don't even agree on literal Genesis or metaphor, baptized by oil or water, immersion, sprinkling, baby, age of accountability. Does hell exist? Does the Holy Spirit allow you to speak in tongues or not? The nature of miracles. I mean, they don't agree on anything. And I think it's just ridiculous, the idea that God would allow these people in a thunderdome of disagreement while he sits on his hands making rainbows and finding people parking spaces. I just think that's crazy. And so, chapter by chapter, I just go through. And then at the end, I really do say a sincere thank you to so many believers who have walked away from the most unpleasant parts of the Bible. I mean, there are a ton, more and more every day, believers who ignore the anti gay verses of the Bible that say homosexuals need to be executed. And they say, no, no, I refuse that. I want to love people across the colors and culture and sexual spectrum. They don't want to mute or marginalize the voices of women. They don't think women should have to be subservient or secondary to a man. They say no, we are all equal. So they write that off, and they may have sort of custom fitted their own faith. They've embraced the best verses of Christ and sort of decided they're going to ignore the worst, and there are some really bad ones. And I think that's great. Granted, they're making a moral decision. They're making a moral judgment outside of the book that many people are saying is necessary to be moral, which I think is interesting. But they genuinely do want to be good people and they want to be good to other people. And the last chapter of the book is really a thank you to them. Thanks for taking a courageous step toward sharing our values as humanists to not be people of hate and judgment and division and damnation, but to be about loving people and accepting them and supporting them for who they are.
Hmm. That kind of brings an interesting little question. Do you think that Jesus right now is, for Christian, he's obviously the Son of God. He's a divinity. Do you think down the road Christianity might evolve Jesus to become maybe more of a philosopher than anything else?
Well, I'm not Yoda on this stuff, but I think Jesus is probably the one part of Christianity that will never go away. I don't, you can wipe hell theology off the map and you can sort of mute this idea that God does miracles like he did in biblical times. You can scratch out the anti-gay verses and you can sort of brush off as metaphor the genocide and slavery verses, etc. But I think Jesus is one of those. He's the franchise player of the entire religion. Do I think he would become mere philosopher? Well, I think in some ways he may already be that, but he will almost always be seen as a deity in some form. He will be a god, perhaps the god, and they will see him as a god who walked among humans. And he would say I mean, and I get that. I think the best teachings of Christ are great. Be humble, love your neighbor, be charitable, blessed are the poor, give away all your stuff, and not all, but I mean, try to be charitable to other people. And the best teachings of Christ, they're not original, but it doesn't mean they're not good. And, I think he will continue to be more of a kind of the biblical Tony Robbins motivational speaker type guy but he'll probably always be seen with a sort of the oil painting halo over his head, a God among men spreading the quote unquote good news.
So when you went to your editor with the idea of the book, I recall the late great Christopher Hitchens when he said, religion poisons everything, and there was pushback from his editor saying, no, you can't really put a title like that. That's just too provocative. Did you bump into the same kind of issue with your editor?
No, I actually, and again, I self-publish. It's not like I have a Penguin Books who's wants to own my stuff. I have the benefit of a built-in audience, and I do it my way for my reasons. I did get pushback a little bit with the previous book that tackled Fox News, probably because they were thinking, lawyers. But I went through a rigorous legal process to ensure that all of the editorial content that I used in the book was fair game, free speech, editorial content that was legal to be used, including the title of the book. At first, the publisher said, we have real concerns. And then I forward them all of the paperwork, the research, the documentation, the case studies, case law, etc., that buttressed my position. And then they reversed and said, okay, fine, we'll do it. But I didn't get too much pushback on this one. Yeah, I do wonder about some of the people in the supply chain, or not in the supply chain, but in the production chain. There have to be believers who are like, they're printing the books and boxing the books and shipping the books, who look at this and probably like, do they pick it up? Do they crank it open? Do they print an extra copy and take it home? Do they want to burn it? Do they pray over it? I do wonder about that.
Yeah, there's a shipment missing all of a sudden. All these books.
I see there's a copy and Greg Locke's burning it at his church in Tennessee. Well, how do you get the copy? Well, maybe you got it from the publisher. I do sometimes wonder, but my hope would be that people see it. I know it's got a harsh title, but I hope that people see it for what it is, and that is that it's directed at me. Christianity made me. I said dumb stuff. And I thought it was profound. I thought it was deep. I thought it was smart. But the truth is, dear Lord, we asked you, guide the hands of the surgeon, makes no sense. I sounded like an idiot. And I think it's fine for me to sort of focus that mirror back upon myself and dissect it. And I hope that maybe somebody else is having some of the same questions, and maybe they'll take the journey with me,
Whenever I hear people talking about the book and the process itself, it seems like such an ordeal. I have no clue what you went through to make a book like that. How difficult is it for you to come up with a book and the printing and the editing and all that stuff? I mean, how much work is into that?
I think it's probably like being a creator in any way. Like you're a songwriter, right? And you start humming something to yourself and you go, hey, I think that's catchy. Maybe somebody else would enjoy it. You sit down and you start writing the music and you're like, hey, this is pretty good. And you get halfway through and you're like, well, God, I'm not sure about this. And you're 2/3 of the way through it and you're like, I think I may hate this. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. What am I doing? And, maybe you push through it. Maybe you put it on the shelf for a while and come back to it. And then when it's over, you can't be objective because you've heard it 1,000 times. Maybe this is the worst. I don't know. And you throw it out and you're desperate to get good feedback, but you're nervous. It's probably like somebody doing any kind of creative work. And books are the same way. Now, being a communicator, storyteller, I'm always just typing and speaking and blathering and yammering. And I just can't shut up. It's one of those, it's a flaw, And the fact that I type so fast, if I get the stream of consciousness going, I can throw a lot of stuff out, a lot of ideas out. But, I talk so much about much of this stuff, it just flows out of me. And I go in streaks. Maybe you guys do as well when you're doing your own work. Maybe you've sat down and you've spent hours typing a paragraph or prepping one thing or doing one thing. And the next day you throw it out and start again. And then a week later, you sit down and the work's pouring out of you so fast, you feel like you can't keep up. It's true inspiration. And that's what writing a book is like. It's probably like any other creative work. You
Mhm.
doubt it, you wonder, you hope it'll be good, you throw it on the shelf a dozen times, you almost throw it in the trash can another dozen times. But if you can push through, maybe you got something, you know?
Fantastic. By the way, Christine, Kathleen, and Aubrey, don't let me monopolize this conversation. If you guys have a question for Seth, jump in by all means. Interrupt me, just jump in.
I was just going to say, when I write, I bleed out every word. Yeah, it doesn't come easy, but
It's
it
like
comes
what?
out
It's like,
well.
is it like childbirth? Like you are extracting it in some
Or
really
like it's
hardcore
coming
way?
out of all my pores, like what
I
word would
mean,
be right here?
But
but
no,
Christine, when you sit down on one day, do you find like I'm fighting to get to the end of the sentence, and then
Yeah.
you can tackle the subject the next day, and it's just there magically, and you're like, it's perfect. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, sometimes, rarely, and that's a good thing. But like I said, yeah, I pretty much bleed it all out. It's
Yeah, yeah.
but then a lot of people say, write everything and just don't, pay any attention and go afterwards and edit. So you get all your thoughts out, but I just can't do that. I have to bleed it through,
I've deleted whole chapters. Like I'll
Yeah.
write a chapter and I'll go back 3 weeks later because I have to go back later and I'll
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
like, this is not right. It feels wrong. It's clumsy. And then I go through and then I have her name is Jessica Vineyard and she
Okay.
runs Red Letter Editing and she's a developmental editor. And I trust her with my life almost. And she goes through and she's able to give me objectivity and say, well, you can be more clear here, or this example makes no sense, or this is redundant, or grammatical error, typo. She's my conscience. And so I like to stand on the shoulder of giants in that way.
Yeah. A good editor is mandatory, or, in the case of academic writing, getting your colleagues to, review your work and that kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? It's very
Yeah.
important. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Fantastic. So the book finally came out, and you can find it pretty much anywhere you can get your books, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you don't have to keep slugging the book, man. I'm just
No,
here
no,
to
no,
talk.
that's
It's
okay.
not like, I mean, I appreciate the support, but I
it.
mean, I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy just to be a part of the conversation. Yeah, you can just go to my website. All the links are there, sethandrews.com. And there's, links to the video and other stuff. And I've got a page for my dogs. People love Linus and Gracie, my children. And so I've got a whole web page just for my little precious puppies. Does anyone else talk to their dogs that way?
Yes,
Absolutely.
always.
Like I
Why
used to
wouldn't
have
you?
big dogs. I had German Shepherd, and then I had Great Danes for about
Oh,
10
wow.
years. I had a couple of Danes
Nice.
and big 170-pound dog. And when I met Natalie, she had a 4-pound Yorkie named Tootsie. And I was just like sneering, like, oh God.
That's
Like,
not a real dog.
what is that? It's like a hamster gone wrong. It's not even a canine. What? And within 2 days, I was that person. I was like, I love you, Poopsie. Come here. I'm going to squeeze you and love you. And since then, I have become a small dog person. You can fit them in your lap. You can hug. They curl up with you on your neck when you sleep. And so anyway, Linus and Gracie are my two current, and they are my world. I'm just such a pushover for them. And they become little mini celebs. I'm always posting photos of them. So
Yeah,
I remember that you raised a bunch of money to get a van for
Yeah.
a shelter. Good on you. Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
we
cool.
the short version of the long story is we had a rescue named Henry, whose people had watched that little 4-pound dog out of a puppy mill. He'd spent probably I don't know 8 years in a cage. I mean, it was just heartbreaking.
Wow.
And we rescued him, and he just transformed. And he went in for dental surgery, and through what we think is medical neglect, really, because he kept him on the table for 3.5 hours,
Ew.
which is far longer than you should ever keep an animal under. His heart stopped and he died, and
Yeah.
we were devastated. We were just blindsided, and then we lost Toots 2 weeks later to a stroke, and so you can see we were both just kicked in the gut.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I did a video, and I'm bawling. I'm just sobbing, just like, oh God, about telling the story. And I said, I don't want this to be the end of Henry's story. I want something good to come out of this. So I called the president of the Humane Society in Tulsa, and I said, do you have a need? And they had a van, wouldn't run, had to be push started. 200 plus thousand miles, was falling apart. No air conditioner, it was a nightmare. And I said, well, what would you be okay if we raise money for a new van? And I figure, we'd raise 12 grand in a week. And this community raised $35,000 in 24 hours.
Wow.
And they got a big rescue van, fully air conditioned, and Henry and Tootsie's pictures are on the van, and they call it the Henry van, and it drives all across the United States, rescuing animals by the thousands.
That's awesome.
And
What a
that's his
lovely
legacy.
tribute.
So anyway, I'm
Yeah.
sorry you mentioned Henry. I got to tell the story because it was amazing to see people come together and respond so generously.
I wanted
we'll-
to tell the story. That's why I asked the question.
We'll see it. We'll
Because
see
it's
it on the
wonderful,
road. Like if you
Yeah.
see it, it's just the coolest thing.
Nice.
It's just like, oh, I bet it's got little doggies and kitties inside, and
Oh my gosh.
so Henry's legacy lives on after all these years, and it makes us really happy.
I love that.
Funny
Yeah.
you should talk about Tulsa Humane Society. That's where we got our dog. And
What do you have? Tell me.
I don't even know. You want me to get her?
Little
Maya.
precious little Bobby.
She's
I want
she'll
you
be
to hug
right
it
here.
and squeeze it.
She has
and
everything. She just is the goofiest looking thing. Everyone's like, what is she? I don't know. She's a dog.
The Heinz
And she
57.
looks ridiculous in the best way. Everyone makes fun of the way she looks.
She looks a little bit like a little
I'll
old
tell,
man.
Yeah, I'll
It's
tell
the
my
best.
husband to bring her.
How
and
cute.
so-
Every
Well,
time I
I'm
come
glad
over-
your dog has you. That's cool.
I'm glad I have her. And she's a perfect dog for the family. So you brought up Tulsa Humane Society, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're
Yeah.
great organization.
No, I'll never buy a dog. I will
Yeah.
rescue for the rest of my life. And
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know about you, Kathleen,
Mm.
but when you see how many people have treated these animals, I
Mhm.
after we got Henry, I just thought there's some people I'm going to put in a cage for 8 years
Yeah,
and let
it's-
you know how it feels.
Yeah.
I want you to
It's-
experience a little bit of what you subjected this animal to.
I don't tend to be a vindictive type of person, but when it comes to that sort of thing, it really does. It makes my blood boil to see the others.
Aw.
I just want to go squeeze you. What a precious puppy.
Aw.
Every time I come over, she brings me a stuffed animal to show me.
she's a
That's-
gift giver.
Yeah.
That's darling. Now, what's the dog's name?
Maya, like
Little
Maya
Maya.
Angelou, but
Nice to
Maya.
meet you, Maya. Nice to meet
Thank
you,
you.
Maya. That's adorable. Okay, sorry. Puppy time on the show. It's mandatory.
Okay, that's what we call it. We took a left of the valley. That's what happens. We
Yeah.
took a
There
left.
you go.
So your book finally came out. How was it? I mean, we know atheists are going to respond very well to the book, obviously, but how about Christians? Was there any pushback from the Christian world?
It's funny. I expected, if I'm going after the people who are questioning, doubting, dissatisfied, I figured it would then bleed over to the people in their circle, which would be the hardliners, and those people would come after me. And so I was bracing. I even put a folder together that just said hate mail. I don't get a lot. I don't get a lot of hate mail. I'm not a combative, confrontational guy.
Yeah.
I love people. I'm married to a God believer. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm just that guy. So I don't attract a lot of the really nasty ones, but I did have a few. Somebody who was a believer came after me, and it's usually a flavor of one day you'll see when you die, right? One day when you stand before the throne of God, you will repent, which is, not exactly Christian love. It's really a threat. Interestingly, I got another one from somebody who was an atheist who felt that I hadn't been tough enough, to say that you're friends with believers and that you are sympathetic and empathetic and share your life with people who are God believers. These are the people who have ruined the world. How dare you enable them?
Oh,
You must hate them in the way that I hate them. And this is rare. I don't see a lot of this, but this person, it was all caps. Part of me wondered if maybe they had some sort of a mental imbalance of some kind. They were just unhinged. But overall, it's been, people have raised an eyebrow, people have asked some questions, but I haven't heard a whole lot directly. Who knows what they're saying when I'm not in the room.
mhm.
when Kevin asked us to be guests again and mentioned your book, my husband and I were talking about it, and I think he looked it up on, I believe, Amazon, and it was doing very well in the Christianity and religion section, and we had a good laugh. He was like, I wonder if Amazon doesn't realize what this book is about. But,
well, I'm sure Christian is one of the key words, or
Yeah.
religion. It's kind of I see the reverse thing when I produce a podcast or a video for an atheist YouTube channel. I have a ton of ads from like Christian movie producers and New Age spiritualists. There was one from Deepak Chopra. I mean,
God.
what exactly does Deepak Chopra think he's going to accomplish on my page? The material world is not physical, and you can think yourself out of aging, as of course his hair goes gray and falls out in front of all of us, as he's aging. But I think the
That and
algorithms and the
AIDS.
keywords get weird. So.
He and what's his name? The positive thinker and speaker you're talking about earlier. What's his name? Anthony.
Tony Robbins.
He and Tony Robbins did this video, and they were talking about HIV and how you can think it away and all the shit. Like, how bloody dangerous can you be? Wow.
I met Deepak Chopra at an event in New York years ago. We actually shared the stage together, and he's just as wacky in real life as he is on camera. I mean,
that doesn't surprise me.
I think he genuinely believes it. I think he is checked out of the hotel reality, and that's just. I mean, that's a guess. He may be a grifter, but he came off to me like a true believer. So,
well, the way you spoke actually made sense, and he makes none of that. Sorry, that's a very poor imitation.
People use words like metaphysical. I just think, wow, it's so impossible to pin down. It's so subjectively used. And, I'm one of those, I'm a naturalist or a methodological naturalist. I just feel like, if it's out there, it's like almost like the mind-body conversations. Like, well, the soul exists outside the mind, but the soul cannot be measured in any scientific way. It exists, but it cannot be seen or detected. And, I think, well, it's kind of convenient. Right? It's beyond our ability to see or measure. I think that's awfully convenient for those people who are making a truth claim on the subject. And the same goes true for Deepak Chopra on a number of issues.
Philosophy metaphysics basically means the study of being, right? So it's not all necessarily airy-fairy. Why are we here? Where do we come from? How do we know? That kind of thing. So not all of metaphysics is necessarily supernatural, right?
Well, that's good to know.
In terms of a philosophy approach to it, right?
Usually the context I hear is it's a little wooish. So I learned something new today. Thanks, Christine.
Well, thank you.
She cracked open a knowledge egg on my head just now. So.
Thank you.
It would be a quantum egg, because that's the one.
Quantum.
Yes.
Quantum.
It's part of our quantum reality.
Oh yeah, so you hadn't had much pushback from the Christians, and which is a shame, because I was really hoping to see like Greg Locke really hold your book and say, "We're going to toss these books into the fire." And
I offered him a book. He doesn't. I don't know if he knows who I am. I've done some videos and podcasts exposing his just vitriol, bile, and hatred. He is. We've always known people like Pastor Greg Locke existed. What terrifies me about him is his popularity. He has not as much in his tent probably, but online. I mean, he's saying what a lot of people are really thinking, and they embrace the idea of a book burning and calling out and casting out the witches and what is extremely nasty and hateful. And again, if you hold to the best verses of the Bible, Jesus would kick this guy to the curb in a hurry. But I think I actually threw a feeler out, and I'm like, dude, if you're going to burn a book here. And then I did a TikTok video, because I'm, like your grandparents on TikToks. It's just pathetic. But I actually tried it. And I said, well, since he won't burn my book, I will. So I took it and just lit a match and laid it on top. And there's this very anticlimactic fizzling and a tiny like pin dot of charring on the front of the cover. And that's all I could come up with.
See, God made your book fireproof.
There you go. I believe it. Miracle.
It's a miracle. TikTok is, I struggle with TikTok. I'm a little bit like, it's like teaching an old person how to program the Blu-ray player. At some point, I'm like, well, I've just finally gotten my head around Facebook and Twitter. Stuff goes out to Instagram, freaking TikTok. I got to deal with something else. And how long are the videos supposed to be? And oh God, it's vertical video. That's an aberration. You can't do vertical video. How do you add the titles and what happens? Apparently it's Thunderdome out there where people are falsely flagging and stuff gets deleted. And so I started a channel and I uploaded a couple of things and I haven't even gone back. So
one of my daughters, my kids are obviously, younger than me and they get this and I'm not quite there yet, but they love it. And one of my daughters has an account that is just her videoing a baby doll in her room and she has millions of followers, thousands, and I cannot understand. She sends me these videos of her throwing a baby doll across the room and it has 60,000 likes. And I'm like, okay, I really don't understand.
When I first started my YouTube channel, we had a lot of viewers and there were a lot fewer people doing this. So I had, a lot of people would flood into the page and they would be like, wow, this channel's really popular. And I'm like, well, I mean, relatively speaking, I may get 200,000 views or subscribers, but the water skiing squirrel has 400 million views. You know what I'm saying?
All time. Yeah.
So I'm just saying, I mean, if it's all relative, I have come in a distant runner-up to the water skiing squirrel and people getting kicked in the nuts on YouTube. Those are the videos that get the views,
So if we could get that water skiing squirrel to burn your book, well,
There's an idea.
somewhere.
or at least go on, TikTok and admit he's agnostic. Maybe I could, have that, the agnostic.
Ride that coattail.
oh, fantastic.
Well, these Karen videos are pretty popular these days, so maybe you could, get a Karen to burn your book.
Yeah.
It's weird seeing people who enjoy such a tremendous amount of latitude and privilege screaming. And it reminds me a little bit of what I came out of. When I was a hardcore Fox News fundie, I was programmed to fear. I mean, it's weird because we're supposed to be a confidence culture, right? The battle is already won. The greatest, most powerful being in the universe has protected us against the evil one. Satan's defeat is written in stone. He has no power, right? No weapon formed against me shall prosper. So I give that lip service, but I spent all my time freaked out about the devil. He's coming, he's embedded in our rock and roll albums and he's part of this. He's in this book or this movie, or the satanic cults are doing this or that, or beyond that. The socialists are coming. Democrats are in league with Lucifer. We're seeing this with QAnon stuff today, right? It's not just that they're Democrats, but they are Democrats who are going behind closed doors as pedophiles, trafficking in children, draining their blood to drink, to create some fountain of youth elixir, just crazy stuff, right? Everybody's coming for us. This political party, the immigrants are coming, the communists, the socialists, the Catholic Church. The end days are near. People are losing their minds. And I think this is not a confidence culture. It's really a culture that's perpetually afraid. And what we're seeing so much of, I think, in this climate is people who know how to weaponize fear are really motivating millions of people with fear as their rallying flag. Find an easily terrified demographic and scare them. And they will do crazy stuff when they're afraid, especially in large groups. And it's been a terrifying time to be alive in that way because we've really seen the extremes come to the fore, and almost everything they are doing and saying, all you have to do is watch Tucker Carlson. It's fear. They're coming, they're going to get you, they're going to get your kids, they're going to take away your faith, they're going to steal your Bibles, they're going to make religion illegal, they want to abort all your babies. I mean, they just literally go after you. And there's a group of people that I think respond to those messages, and now they are afraid of everyone and everything. It's a tragic way to live, and it's dangerous.
So dangerous.
Yeah.
It's tragic. It freaks me out. Like
Yeah.
I have family in that, and I'm like, well, because you talked about having like Pentecostal, Baptist, stuff like that. Do you look at your family? I don't know where they are now, but as what I would like to call myself as a progressive Christian, I look at some of my family and I'm like, you guys are so full of religion and this is the all-knowing God, and yet you're so freaking scared.
Yeah. Well, I came out of such a hardline, fundamental Bible literalist, thing. And my folks were so hardcore. I mean, I didn't know how abnormal it was till I got out. My father passed away last year, but he at one time committed to try to memorize the entire book of Revelation, and he made it through chapter 7. I mean, that's how hardcore he was. I don't know if you've read the book of Revelation, but it is an LSD fever dream of
Just don't. It's not.
It doesn't make sense. I mean, it can if you
I know
really
it
want to
doesn't.
make it make sense.
You have to force it to.
I
But
mean, you lost me, when the whore of Babylon flies in through space on the 7-headed dragon with 10 horns and there's blood coming out of the sky. Yeah. I don't know. I'm out.
I haven't
I'm out.
really touched that
But
one.
but mom is very much that way, and my parents saw me and were horrified. They stacked the deck and did everything they could to try to raise a child in the way that he should go. Christian school, Christian church, Christian everything. And to see me not just be a non-believer, but be on the front lines like this it has been shattering, and it kills me. It's like, it is not what I want. I didn't do this to hurt my family.
Yeah.
But I think everyone deserves an authentic life. And while I was surrounded by people who are living their faith, I mean, that mom and dad got to be true to themselves. And my siblings who are religious are being true to themselves without apology. And I was always the one sitting on their hands trying to keep the quote unquote peace, which isn't peace in that context. It's just an absence of conflict. Right. And I thought, well, how come I'm being treated with a different set of rules? Why can't I be me? And if a worthy God is up there, a moral God who sees a guy like me who's doing his best to try to figure it out, and I'll make the commitment to everybody that if God is revealed tomorrow, I'll delete the site, I'll change my position, I will make a public apology. Right? I'm that guy. Like, let's just do that. Okay. Whatever happens,
if evidence comes to bear, then
right? I think that's
I'm
the
morally
honest position.
obligated to accept that evidence, right?
If a God, and then we can get into the question of whether that God is worthy to be worshipped or followed. But I mean, I would want to know that. But if a worthy God is there, I don't think that God sends me to burn in hell for doing his best, for trying to be honest, for trying to figure it out, for trying to help other people to give themselves permission to live an authentic life, which is my thing. I'm not standing in the steps of Fundy churches saying, this is the stupidest stuff I've ever heard. I don't do any of that. What I'm interested in is what happens if somebody feels guilty for having their own thoughts and feelings. They've been told, well, you have to be like us, you have to echo our faith culture or carry the family standard or worship like us, or you're not allowed to love who you love, and if you do, we will penalize you in some way. I've seen college students, parents, their parents say, if you say anything else about questioning our faith, we're going to pull your college tuition. So not only are they holding him emotionally blackmailed, but he is being blackmailed financially, which may affect the rest of his life. It happens all the time. And that's my
Christianity too, Islam,
I just want to say, maybe it's okay. Maybe life is short and it's too short to live somebody else's truth. Try to figure out what your truth is, or pursue your truth on your terms, and it's okay. And a worthy God would look at that and say, okay, I buy that. I won't punish that. I hold to that very much.
I agree. So, Seth, what's coming up for you down the road? Do you have a next book that's coming in the making or somewhere in your mind, or what about the show?
No. I mean, I started something years ago that I've been pecking away at. That's a dissection of the Christian Bible chapter by chapter, and it's so freaking overwhelming that I'll peck at it and put it back on the shelf and then go to the movies, right? Or go binge watch Ozark or something. But but mostly I'm watching the world open back up And so, I've been to a couple of conventions, and it was so much fun to be around people who don't give me
Mhm.
that sort of pathetic look of pity, oh, poor Seth, we just need to show him the love of Jesus, that kind of thing. Mm. You can just be around people who are like, oh, whatever, there's no judgment, there's no shame. You're not like my mother's called me an embarrassment to the family, right? Well, I can go to the American Atheist Convention and there's none of that. It's, hey, we accept you for who you are.
Yeah.
And we can talk about the finer details. We can get into the philosophy and all the other stuff. But ultimately, it's a culture of, hey, it's okay. And so that's mostly what I'm doing. I'm getting ready to go to Fort Wayne, Indiana. I'm going to Toronto. I'm going to be in Memphis. I'm going to Minneapolis. I've got all these other things that are sort of coming together for the rest of the year. All those events are going to be listed at sethandrews.com.
What's happening in Toronto?
There's an event called the Blue Water Atheists, Humanists, something conference, Baja Con or something is what they call it.
Okay.
And so that's happening,
Have
I
you?
think, in August, I want to say.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be cool.
So let me get this straight. You're going to Toronto on purpose?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're
Well,
right about
it's
that.
fun. People like me at the convention circuit because, they'll bring up these really, 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 really smart people, like really smart PhD types, and they'll give a very substantive presentation. They like me because I'm flashy and loud. So I substitute verve and volume for substance. Right? I just go up and I just say, "Hey, hey, Ontario!" People are like, "Yeah." So I'm the rodeo clown that comes in and just does loud, flashy, colorful slides and tries to stir the pot for 45 minutes. But it's a joy. It's doing a show for a podcast, as it goes out, but you don't get that immediate sonar ping of audience feedback, the eyes, the voices, the face, the expressions. But in a live environment, the audience and you have this amazing symbiotic relationship where you really can take the journey together, and it's always a ball. It's just always so much fun. So.
Nice. Yeah.
Seth, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. And the book is Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot. You can find that at sethandrews.com, right?
I feel like I need to give you my Amex number for all the mentions you've given me. I have guilt, Well, it's an honor. Ultimately, the book is the book, whatever. It's mostly, I think, about people just being people. I mean, we're all a great example. We probably come from a variety of different perspectives, opinions, beliefs, values, etc. But at the end of the day, I think we have so much more in common than we ever would have in disagreement. And you're the kind of people I'd love to just hang with. I think it'd be fun if we could all be in the same room and just chill. And I think, if we can focus on our shared humanity more and stop finding these, this tremendous eagerness to find points of division and splintering and whatnot. But, I think we're missing a lot of opportunities to share life together, as they would say in the church, to do life together.
Amen.
And I'm honored to be able to do this conversation with all of you. I just think you're fantastic, and I'd love a chance to see you in person one day soon.
Yeah, I hope to see you again soon. We've hung out. And yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I know Christine. We go.
Bring him coffee. Bring him coffee.
Yeah.
You should do it like a new podcast, just like the connoisseurs of coffee. Just discuss coffee brands.
Free.
That'd be fun.
I would subscribe. I'm ready.
The problem is you can't smell coffee on the internet. Like part of the experience is you have to breathe it in, sweet nectar of the gods. Because when I'm done with my coffee, it's like candy, right? I've got Splenda, I've got my creamer, a little sprinkle of cinnamon. I mean, it's like a dessert. So that may not even be coffee to the purists. I do not know. But no, it's been a lot of fun for me. I appreciate the invite.
Seth, before I let you go, I gotta have you say, "Hi, this is Seth Andrews, and I took a left at the valley."
Hi, this is Seth Andrews, and I took a left at the valley.
Fantastic.
Nice.